chapter 6, the divine paradox, the Kybalion. This is the paradox of the universe, resulting from the principle of polarity which manifests when the all begins to create. Hearken to it, for it points the difference between the half wisdom and wisdom. While to the infinite all, the universe, its laws, its powers, its life, its phenomenon, are as things witnessed in the state of meditation or dream. Yet to all that is finite, the universe must be treated as real, and life, and action, and thought, and must be based thereupon accordingly, although with an ever understanding of the higher truth, each according to its own plane and laws. Were the all to imagine that the universe were indeed reality, then woe to the universe, for there would be then no escape from lower to higher. Divine word then would the universe become a fixity, and progress would become impossible. And if man, owing to half wisdom, acts and lives and thinks of the universe as merely a dream, akin to his own finite dreams, then indeed it does make it so. It does it so become. Sometimes this stuff is just written and printed in strange ways. Then indeed it does it. So, then indeed does it so become for him. That just sounds weird. Then indeed does it so become for him. I don't know what that means, but there you go. And like a sleepwalker, he stumbles ever around and around in a circle, making no progress, and being forced into an awakening at last by his falling bruised and bleeding over the natural laws which he ignored. Keep your mind ever on the star, but let your eyes watch over your footsteps, lest you fall into the mire by reason and your upward gaze. Remember the divine paradox, that while the universe is not, still it is. Remember ever the two poles of truth, the absolute and the relative. Beware of half-truths. What Hermeticists know as the law of paradox is an aspect of the principle of polarity. The Hermetic writings are filled with references to the appearance of the paradox and the consideration of the problems of life and being. The teachers are constantly warning their students against the error of omitting the other side of any question, and their warnings are particularly directed to the problems of the absolute and the relative, which perplex all students of philosophy and which cause so many to think and act contrary to what is generally known as common sense. And we caution all students to be sure to grasp the divine paradox of the absolute and relative, lest they become entangled in the mire of the half-truth. With this in view, this particular lesson has been written. Read it carefully. I will do that as best I can with you. I mean, well, okay, you want to tell me to read it carefully, I'll try, but can you at least use the English language properly? I mean, you got to have a little give back here. I mean, I'll read this carefully, but my God, I hope you use the English language better than you have before in the remainder of this book. The first thought that comes to the thinking man after he realizes the truth that the universe is a mental creation of the all is that the universe and all that it contains is a mere illusion, an unreality against which idea his instincts revolt. But this, like all other great truths, must be considered both from the absolute and the relative points of view. From the absolute viewpoint, of course, the universe is in the nature of an illusion, a dream, a phantasmagoria, as compared to the all itself. We recognize this even in our ordinary view, for we speak of the world as a fleeting show that comes and goes, is born and dies. For the element of impermanence and change, finiteness and insubstantiality must ever be connected with the idea of a created universe when it is contrasted with the idea of the all. No matter what may be our beliefs concerning the nature of both. Philosopher, metaphysician, scientist, and theologian all agree upon this idea. And the thought is found in all forms of philosophical thought and religious conceptions, as well as in the theories of the respective schools of metaphysics and theology. So the Hermetic teachings do not preach the unsubstantiality of the universe in any stronger terms than those more familiar to you, although their presentation of the subject may seem somewhat more startling. Anything that has a beginning and an ending must be, in a sense, unreal and untrue. And the universe comes under the rule in all schools of thought. From the absolute point of view, there is nothing real except the all, no matter what terms we may use in thinking of or discussing the subject. Whether the universe be created of matter or whether it be a mental creation in the mind of the all is unsubstantial, non-enduring, a thing of time, space, and change. We want you to realize this fact thoroughly before you pass judgment on the Hermetic conception of the mental nature of the universe. Think over any and all of the other conceptions and see whether or not this be true of them. Well, the absolute point of view shows merely one side of the picture. The other side is the relative one. Absolute truth has been defined as things as the mind of God knows them, while relative truth is things as the highest reason of man understands them. And so while to the all, the universe must be unreal and illusionary, a mere dream or result of meditation, nevertheless, to the finite minds forming a part of that universe and viewing it through mortal faculties, the universe is very real indeed and must be so considered. In recognizing the absolute view, we must not make the mistake of ignoring or denying the facts and phenomena of the universe as they present themselves to our moral faculties. We are not the all, remember. To take familiar illustrations, we all recognize the fact that matter exists in our senses. We will fare badly if we do not, and yet even our finite minds understand the scientific dictum that there is no such thing as matter from a scientific point of view. That which we call matter is held to be merely an aggregation of atoms, which atoms themselves are merely a grouping of units of force called electrons or ions, vibrating and in constant circular motion. We kick a stone and we feel the impact. It seems to be real, notwithstanding that we know it to be merely what we have stated above. But remember that our foot, which feels the impact by means of our brains, is likewise matter, and so constituted of electrons, and for that matter, so are our brains. And at the best, if it were not by reason of our mind, we would not know the foot or stone at all. Then again, the ideal of the artist or sculptor, which he is endeavoring to reproduce in stone or on canvas, seems very real to him. So do the characters in the mind of the author or dramatist, which he seeks to express so that the others may recognize them. And if this be true in the case of our finite minds, what must be the degree of reality in the mental images created in the mind of the infinite? O friends to the mortals, this universe of mentality is very real indeed. It is the only one we can ever know. Though we rise from plane to plane, higher and higher in it, to know it otherwise, but actual experience, we must be the all itself. It is true that the higher we rise, in the nearer to the mind of the Father we reach, the more apparent becomes the illusionary nature of finite things, but not until the all finally withdraws us into itself does the vision actually vanish. So we need not dwell upon the feature of illusion. Rather, let us, recognizing the real nature of the universe, seek to understand its mental laws and endeavor to use them to the best effect in our upward progress through life, as we travel from plane to plane of being. The laws of the universe are nonetheless iron laws because of the mental nature. All except the all are bound by them. What is in the infinite mind of the all is real in a degree second only to that reality itself, which is vested in the nature of the all. So do not feel insecure or afraid. We are all held firmly in the infinite mind of the all. And there is not to hurt us or nothing for us to fear. There is no power outside of the all to affect us. So we may rest calm and secure. There is a world of comfort and security in this realization when once attained. Then calm and peaceful do we sleep, rocked in the cradle of the deep, resting safely on the bosom of the ocean of the infinite mind, which is the all. In the all, indeed, do we live and move and have our being. Matter is nonetheless matter to us. When we dwell on the plane of matter, although we know it to be merely an aggregation of electrons or particles of force, vibrating rapidly and gyrating around each other and in the formations of atoms, the atoms in turn vibrating and gyrating, forming molecules, which latter in turn form larger masses of matter. Nor does matter become less matter when we follow the inquiry still further and learn from the Hermetic teachings that the force of which the electrons are but units is merely a manifestation of the mind of the all. And like all else in the universe, is purely mental in its nature. While on the plane of matter, we must recognize its phenomenon. We may control matter, as all masters of higher or lesser degrees do, but we do so by applying the higher forces. We commit a folly when we attempt to deny the existence of matter in the relative aspect. We may deny its mastery over us, and rightly so, but we should not attempt to ignore it in its relative aspect, at least so long as we dwell upon its plane. Nor do the laws of nature become less constant or effective when we know them. Likewise, to be merely mental creations, they are in full effect on the various planes. We overcome the lower laws by applying still higher ones, and in this way only. But we cannot escape law or rise above it entirely. Nothing but the all can escape law, and that is because the all is law itself, from which all laws emerge. The most advanced masters may acquire the powers usually attributed to the gods of men, and there are countless ranks of being in the great hierarchy of life, whose being and power transcends even that of the highest masters among men to a degree unthinkable by mortals. But even the highest master and the highest being must bow to the law, as be as nothing in the eye of the all. So that if even these highest beings, whose power exceeds even those attributed by men to their gods, if even these are bound by and are subservient to law, then imagine the presumption of mortal men of our race and grade when he dares to consider the laws of nature as unreal, visionary, and illusionary. Just because he happens to be able to grasp the truth that the laws are mental in nature and simply mental creations of the law. Those laws which the all intends to be governing laws are not to be defiled or argued away. So long as the universe endures, will they endure, for the universe exists by virtue of these laws, which form its framework and which hold it together. The Hermetic principle of mentalism, while explaining the true nature of the universe upon the principle that all is mental, does not change the scientific conceptions of the universe, or life, or evolution. In fact, science merely corroborates the Hermetic teachings. The latter merely teaches that the nature of the universe is mental, while modern science has taught that it is material, or as of late, that it is energy. The Hermetic teachings have no fault to find with Herbert Spencer's basic principle, which postulates the existence of infinite and eternal energy, from which all things proceed. In fact, the Hermetics recognize in Spencer's philosophy the highest outside statement of the workings of the natural laws that have ever been promulgated. And they believe Spencer to have been a reincarnation of an ancient philosopher who dwelt in ancient Egypt thousands of years ago and who later incarnated as Heraclitus. Heraclitus? Wow. Heraclitus? Heraclitus. Wow, cool. Yeah, I've been studying Heraclitus a lot. Yeah, that's good stuff. The Grecian philosopher who lived BC 500, and they regard his statements of the infinite and eternal energy as directly in the line of the Hermetic teachings, always with the addition of their own doctrine that this energy is the energy of the mind of the all. With the master key of the Hermetic philosophy, the student of Spencer will be able to unlock many doors of the inner philosophical conceptions of the great English philosopher, whose work shows the results of the preparation of his previous incarnations. His teachings regarding evolution and rhythm are in almost perfect agreement with the Hermetic teachings regarding the principle of rhythm. So the student of hermeneutics need not lay aside any of his cherished scientific views regarding the universe. All he is asked to do is to grasp the underlying principle of the all is mind. The universe is mental, held in the mind of the all. He will find that the other 6 of the 7 principles will fit into his scientific knowledge and will serve to bring out the obscure points and to throw light in dark corners. This is not to be wondered at when we realize the influence of the Hermetic thought of the early philosophers of Greece, upon whose foundations of thought the theories of modern science largely rest. The acceptance of the first Hermetic principle, mentalism, is the only great point of difference between modern science and Hermetic students, and science is gradually moving towards the Hermetic position in its groping in the dark for a way out of the labyrinth into which it has wandered in its search for reality. The purpose of this lesson is to impress upon the minds of our students the fact that to all intents and purposes, the universe and its laws and its phenomenon are just as real, so far as man is concerned, as they would be under the hypotheses of materialism or energyism. Under any hypothesis, the universe in its outer aspect is changing, ever-flowing, and transitory, and therefore devoid of substantiality and reality. But under the same hypothesis, we are compelled to act and live as if the fleeting things were real and substantial. With this difference always between the various hypotheses, I don't know why they keep saying it like they should just say various hypotheses. I think they keep saying hypotheses. I don't know why they say it like that. But under the old views, mental power was ignored as a natural force, while under mentalism, it becomes the greatest natural force. And this one difference revolutionizes life. To those who understand the principle and its resulting laws in practice. So finally, students all grasp the advantage of mentalism and learn to know, use, and apply the laws resulting therefrom. But do not yield to the temptation which, as the Kybalion states, overcomes the half-wise and which causes them to be hypnotized by the apparent unreality of things. That's great advice. I was talking about that the other day. You see people that do that. Do not yield to the temptation and become half-wise and be hypnotized by the apparent unreality of things. The consequence being that they wander about like dream people, dwelling in a world of dreams, ignoring the practical work and life of man, the end being that they are broken against the rocks and torn asunder by the elements. That's what happens to a lot of people, man. I got to tell you from experience, I've experienced a lot of people that this has happened to. They get into this stuff and they get, like they're saying here, they realize that it's all an illusion. But because they're not willing to go the rest of the way and do the work of what that you can't just stop. Once you realize everything's an illusion, that just doesn't mean you just stop right there. You have to continue to try and understand the illusion and use it as best you can. But like they're saying here, it causes you to become half-wise and be hypnotized by the apparent unreality of things, the consequence being that they wander around about like dream people. Well, yeah, you see people, they're just like, oh, no, I don't care, whatever. It's all an illusion, so I don't care if, Alex Jones is trying to get people riled up into civil war, or, I don't care about all that because we're all one and it's all an illusion anyway. Right. And that's, and who also says the exact same thing? The Christians. Well, I don't care. It doesn't matter. I believe in Jesus. I'm going to be raptured out anyway. So who cares? That's dangerous. That's when they've got you. Rather than follow the example of the wise, which the same authority states, use law against laws, the higher against the lower. And by the art of alchemy, transmute that which is undesirable into that which is worthy, and thus triumph. Following the authority, let us avoid the half-wisdom, which is folly, which ignores the truth, that mastery consists not in abnormal dreams or visions or fantastic imaginings or living, but in using the higher forces against the lower escaping of the pains of the lower planes by vibrating on the higher. Now that's I know that to be a fact. That does work. You know, that's what people who want to get you upset about things or get you drag you down to some lower vibratory state. Some people when they see you happy or they see you doing good, they're so miserable in their own lives, in their own situations, that they start having to do negative things towards you to try and bring you down off of your, you know, your high or your, you know, your crest of the wave that you're riding for being successful or whatever it may be, you know. And so how you overcome those is by constantly concentrating on the higher vibrations. And that absolutely is true. You can make those lower vibrations go away real quick if you don't allow yourself to resonate with those lower frequencies. Only resonate with the higher ones. Keep that in mind next time something is, you know, attempting to get into your space and take your energy. Because, you know, energy vampires are everywhere, man. And that's one of the things that they do. They love to be able to suck the energy of someone who has a, you know, a high energy or a high, you know, high energy soul. And they have a lesser soul because they've pissed it away in bullshit realities. And so then they want to come and try to take yours and bring you down to their level. That's when you have to constantly keep in mind that thought and that vibration of the higher aspects. We do not live in a world of dreams, but in a universe which, while relative, is real so far as our lives and actions are concerned. Our business in the universe is not to deny its existence, but to live using the laws to rise from the lower to the higher, living on, doing the best that we can under the circumstances arising each day, and living, so far as it is possible, to our highest ideas and ideals. The true meaning of life is not known to men on this plane, if indeed to any but the highest authority and our own intuitions. They teach us that we will make no mistake in living up to the best that is in us, so far as it is possible, and realizing the universal tendency in the same direction in spite of apparent evidences to the contrary. We are all on the path, and the road leads upward ever, with frequent resting places. Read the message of the Kybalion and follow the example of the wise, avoiding the mistake of the half-wise who perish by reason of their folly. All right, let's go to the Kybalion now, Chapter 7, Chapter 7, the All in All, I believe is where we are. Yeah, which would be page 28. How often have the majority of people heard repeated the statement that their deity, called by many names, was all in all? I have a song I wrote called All in All. That's crazy. I wrote that about 10 years ago, long before I ever read any of this. I forgot about that song. That's a good song. I forgot. I've written 100 songs, 150 songs over the years. And how little they have suspected the inner occult truth concealed by these carelessly uttered words. The commonly used expression is a survival of the ancients. And the ancient Hermetic maxim quoted above, while all is in the all, it is equally true that all is in all. To him who truly understands this truth hath come great knowledge. That's crazy, because that's the line in the song that I wrote, all in all is all you'll ever be. Long to be all of me, all in all is all we'll ever be. I didn't know any of this stuff. Wow, that's amazing. Because I didn't know about this when I wrote that song 10, 11 years ago. I'm gonna have to go find those lyrics and because I have some versions of that song recorded somewhere I did 10 years ago. I doubt I'd ever let any of you hear it because, but it's unbelievable. I mean, I was expressing that statement exactly right there in a song 10 years ago and didn't even know anything about this. That's one of the amazing things of the human psyche to me, is that sometimes, you ever heard the phrase or the statement, learning is just remembering something again for the first time. It's actually so true, because sometimes we find that we have a knowledge of things that we've never learned. For instance, when I used to telling people about conspiracies and stuff like that, not really even conspiracies, just facts, truth. I used to tell my dad that cigarettes and alcohol and all this stuff were a part of population control. And that's how they called the population. Guys, I got to be honest with you, I didn't have anything to back that up at that time. I don't know how I knew that. I never learned that. I never came across it. The internet was not around at that time when I had said that to my dad. Wasn't it? And 3 or 4 years ago, he had remembered that when I had said that to him, back when I was 18, 19. And a couple years ago, I'm 35 now, he said, man, you were telling me all that shit was population reduction. You were telling me that shit 10, 15 years ago. And I was like, yeah, I was, wasn't I? And I said, Dad, the crazy thing about it is that I didn't have any knowledge of it. I just knew it was true. And then later to come to find out, you have data and research and things to back up the fact that those things are true. It's unbelievable. And there's been a lot of things that I have come across in my research, things that I've known longer than I had anything to back it up with. Like, for instance, on the day of 9/11, I knew instantly on the day of 9/11 that it was not what they were telling us it was. But every time I would try to say to somebody that day, this is not what they're telling you it is, they would misunderstand me. They would either misunderstand me, or they would just say, you're out of your goddamn mind. You're a fucking lunatic, crazy conspiracy theorist, and you need to shut the fuck up right now, because this is not the same as that, and you're fucking out of your goddamn mind. Shut up. But then, of course, now, when you have stuff to back that up, it's completely different. That's happened to me so many times. I don't know how we have that ability sometimes but I think it's absolutely true. I have never read what I just read to you folks, but I swear to you, I have a song I wrote 10 or 11 years ago that expresses that whole thing. I'll try to find those lyrics and read them to you guys on another show. It just blows my mind. And I think back to all those the times, when I used to talk about for instance, I don't know why. I remember hearing at a very young age that I somehow had a connection to Freemasons. And I remember hearing about Freemasons, not that they were a secret society or any specifics, just remember hearing about them at a very young age, because I was born with a club foot. And I was born on 7/6/76, right as Sirius was apexing, you numerologist, 7/6 of 1976. That's my birthday. You numerologists do the math there. And I was born with a club foot. Well, those things are very symbolic to somebody who's a Freemason. Well, my dad's best friend was a Dallas police officer, and he was he's a guy that started the mounted police in Dallas, and he was a Scottish Rite Freemason. And the day that I was born, and I got a great story I haven't told you guys about yet, but I'll tell you here. On the day I was born, this guy, he sponsored me. And I was born with a club foot, and that's where your foot's turned in, and it was, was basically going to make me crippled. And that was, my parents didn't have the money to, pay for medical bills and all this stuff. And he sponsored me through Scottish Rite, and I got all my medical, everything paid for until the time I was 18. And so I had corrective surgery when I was about 5 or 6, and my whole life growing up, even from like 7 or 8, I always knew there was some connection to aliens and Freemasons. And I don't know how, this is days long before the internet. This is back when we had, 3 channels of regular TV and like 20 channels of cable if we were lucky. That's if you had the deluxe package that had HBO, Skinamax, and Showtime. And sometimes, the movie channel. Remember those days? We had those fucking gigantic fucking click cable boxes. God, it was god awful, wasn't it? But I just always knew there was a connection to that. And when the internet came about, one of the first things I ever looked up was Freemasons and aliens. And I flipped. I just absolutely flipped. Because I was starting to find that there were things that I had inherently known all my life were connected together. And here was evidence. For the first time, I'm seeing evidence. And oh my God, there are other people out there in the world who've thought that same thing. And now here's this thing called the internet, and here's web pages and people talking about it. I mean, we take it for granted now, folks, but I mean, you know, now this is our time. We still have this internet to use as a tool to do some good. And you know, that was I think that was kind of that was maybe a year or two before 9/11 too. Couple years. No, it was a couple years. It was longer than that. It was a couple years before 9/11. I know the internet was around longer than that, but you know, regular folks really didn't get at least where I live here in Dallas. Regular folks really didn't get, you know, full blown access to the internet till, you know, till the late 90s. I used to go to the library all the time. You know, it was probably 98, 90, 97, 98, 99, somewhere in there. And, you know, I started finding all this research stuff. And I think that, you know, I was going through a time in my life where I was really trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And right before 9/11, I really thought that I was really getting a good handle on that. Although everything that I would do, I was unhappy with any jobs that I would do, because any job I've always ever had, I've always been great at it. I've always been a manager or, you know, upper management, or always had, you know, but I was always terribly unhappy no matter what job I would do. And the only time it seemed like I was happy doing something was when I was doing something that was initiating my creativity. Whether it be music or whether it be, you know, producing stuff. At that time, I was really just doing music. I really, you know, but I was researching stuff too, and I was really into computers. And so I started working for a software company. It was right before 9/11. I mean, it was good. I was making fucking amazing cash, you know, for somebody that didn't have a college degree. I mean, making $14-15 an hour in, you know, 2000, 2001. 14, 15, $16 an hour. That was, you know, that's pretty fucking good for a guy like me, man. You know, but still, there was always something. There was just this thing that was nagging at me. So in my spare time, while I was working for the software company, I was always constantly reading, and I just right about that time, Strassman's DMT book had come out. Right about that time, I started gotten that. I'd been reading that. I was reading a lot of Carlos Castaneda at the time, and a lot of Robert Anton Wilson. I was reading. Different, you know, Eastern philosophies, really getting into Buddhism and stuff at that time. Because for that point in time, I considered myself an atheist, and I had this sort of a religious experience on the closest thing I could ever consider to be one on a mountaintop in Oklahoma. I just broken up with a girlfriend, and I was just really having a bad time. And something reached out of the sky and just, I just felt the presence that I wasn't alone. Something told me, you know, and it was just amazing. So after that, I started researching more of these things, and I got, you know, I was then of course 9/11 happens, and right after 9/11 happens, everything goes tits up. They ship my job over to India, and I'm just left back at square one again. You know, like everything I'd done for the past 3 or 4 years of my life just didn't matter at that moment. And I was just lost. I didn't know what to do. So I started hanging out with some different friends, and, you know, not really working to do anything for a long time, and, you know, doing drugs and that kind of stuff. And, I found myself in a position in about 2002. I found myself in a position where I didn't have anywhere else to go. I didn't even have anywhere to live. I had, used up all of my resources, and, I found this, like, it was supposed to be like a meditation retreat. It was out in the middle of nowhere. And I went to this thing, and long story short, this thing was some kind of weird cult, man. It was nuts. I had to end up calling my mom, my stepdad to come out. My stepdad came out with guns, lock and load, ready to just fucking shoot somebody because they told me they weren't going to let me leave. And I was freaked out by that. And I was like, no. They were like, you cannot leave. It was this old Indian woman, like dots, not feathers. But anyway, yeah, it was just, it was kind of a weird time for me. But getting back to what I was talking about here, and there was a story that I was going to relate, and I don't remember. It was a story I had never told before, and I can't remember what this story was now. I was going to tell it now. I can't remember it, but I hate when it happens. But again, it's just it's just one of those amazing things where I just was blown away by the fact that I understood this concept and to talk about and written about this concept 10, 11 years ago when I never heard of this. And it just happened to me a multitude of times. It's happened to me to the point where I just can't think that it's a coincidence anymore. I mean, for whatever reason, man, my life has been one nonstop journey, good or bad, to get me to where I am now. I'm supposed to be here doing this. And I don't know what all that entails yet, folks, but all I can tell you is that, this is what I'm supposed to do. Everything in my life has gotten me to where I am now doing this. And that's why I'm going to keep doing it. That's just all there is to it. We have given you the Hermetic teaching regarding the mental nature of the universe. The truth that the universe is mental, held in the mind of the all, as the Kybalion says. In the passage quoted above, all is in the all. But note also the correlated statement that it is equally true that the all is in the all. This apparently contradictory statement is reconcilable under the law of paradox. It is, moreover, an exact Hermetic statement of the relations existing between the all and its mental universe. We have seen how all is in the all. Now let us examine the other aspect of the subject. The Hermetic teachings are to the effect that the all is immanent in remaining within, inherent, abiding within its universe, and in every part, particle, unit, or combination within the universe itself. This statement is usually illustrated by the teachers by a reference to the principle of correspondence. The teacher instructs the student to form a mental image of something, a person, an idea, something having a mental form. The favorite example being that of an author or dramatist forming an idea of his characters, or a painter or sculptor forming an image of an ideal that he wishes to express in his art. Each case, the student will find that while the image has its existence and being solely within his own mind, yet he, the student, author, dramatist, painter, or sculptor, is, in a sense, immanent in and remaining within or abiding within the mental image also. In other words, the entire virtue, life, spirit of reality in the mental image is derived from the immanent mind of the thinker. And I read a book around this time I was talking about earlier, about 10 years ago. It was called The Self-Aware Universe, and it was very lengthy and kind of, the big wordy book, but it's out there if you can find it. It's a good read. The Self-Aware Universe. I can't remember who wrote it, but it put forward this idea that they're putting forward here, that anything in material reality had to have started out with a pure thought or energy. And it put forward this idea that, as this has, that the creator or whatever it may be, pure consciousness, can only express itself by creating vehicles in which to experience itself. And that's truly actually what we all are. We are all the manifestations of a great consciousness experiencing itself in every possible way there is to experience. And so that's not a big concept for me to grasp, because I think there's a lot of truth in that. Because here's the thing. Everything that exists had its start or its creation in something. And if you are, let's say that you decide that you want to build a chair. Okay, so you think about it, you go, okay, I want to build a chair. So you think about this, you get a picture in your mind of what this chair looks like. You can do it right now. Close your eyes and think about building a chair. Think about, like, okay, we're going to build a chair. Now visualize in your mind what you want the chair that you're going to build to look like. You see it? You can visualize it. You can see it right there in your mind's eye. But where does that chair exist? Where in space-time does that chair exist right now? Nowhere. Or you could argue that, well, it exists in space-time. It doesn't exist in the material universe yet. Okay. So it just exists as pure thought, pure energy, pure thought form, but it's not material in the material universe, correct? Okay, so now you go to the hardware store, you buy all the parts, you get out the materials, you get out the tools you need, and you saw, cut, there you go, screw it together, put it in, do a little work. All right, 6 hours later, here you have a fucking chair. So there is your chair. It's done. It's in front of you. You visualize it in your mind's eye. You created it. It's now in front of you. But before you visualize, that chair did not exist. Now it's a tangible thing that you can touch and you can feel, but it's still an illusion. So is there really a difference between the chair that you visualize in your eyes mind and the chair that you see material in front of you? You would say yes, because you can materially touch this and see it, but you could still materially see the chair even though it hadn't been formed. But in order to experience that chair and to experience all the things that a chair does for you, like being able to sit in it, namely, number one, or stand up on it to get to something, you need to reach. You can't have the experience of standing on that chair or sitting in that chair until you have the material chair in front of you. You can imagine it in your head all day long, but that doesn't matter. So what we believe is that at the point at which the chair is material in front of us and can be used to sit in or stand on, at that point, that's when the chair becomes real. Now, wait a minute. It was just as real when you visualized it in your mind's eye, wasn't it? You saw it sitting there, didn't you? And so they trick us into believing that only the things that we can tangibly see and tangibly put our hands on have any use or even real. And I think that is one of the key elements of how they keep us and keep our minds in this, quote unquote, for lack of a better term, matrix. It really is a matrix. And I think that's one of the key ways they keep it there. Consider this for a moment until the idea is grasped. Take a modern example. Let us say Othello, Iago, Hamlet, Lear, Richard III existed merely in the mind of Shakespeare. At the time of their conception or creation, and yet Shakespeare also existed within each of these characters, giving them their vitality, spirit, and action. Who is the spirit of the characters that we know as Micawber, Oliver Twist, Uriah Heep, etc.? It is Dickens. Is it Dickens, or have each of these characters a personal spirit independent of their creator? Have the Venus of Medici, the Sistine Madonna, the Apollo Belvedere spirits, do they have spirits and reality of their own, or do they represent the spiritual and mental power of their creators? The law of paradox explains that both propositions are true, viewed from the proper viewpoints. Micawber is both Micawber and yet Dickens, and again, while Micawber may be said to be Dickens, yet Dickens is not identical with Micawber. Man, like Micawber may explain, the spirit of my creator is inherent within me, and yet I am not he. How different this from the shocking half-truth so ferociously announced by certain members of the half-wise who fill the air with their raucous cries of, I am God. Imagine poor Micawber or the sneaky Uriah Heep crying, I am Dickens, or some of the lowly clods in one of Shakespeare's plays, grandiloquy announcing that I am Shakespeare. The all is in the earthworm, and yet the earthworm is far from being the all. What? Wait. Is that like the fucking the worm is the spice and the spice is the worm? That sounds like some Dune shit. Wasn't that what it was in Dune? I got my sister and her boyfriend got me Dune on Blu-ray for Christmas. And oh man, it just looked fantastic. I mean, it just, oh man. But yeah, I remember remember the big sandworm, the sandworm with the spice. The sandworm is the spice is the worm. And yet the earthworm is far from being the all. And still the wonder remains that through the earthworm exists merely as though the earthworm exists merely as a lowly thing created and having its being solely within the mind of the all, yet the all is immanent in the earthworm and in the particles that go to make up the earthworm. Can there be any greater mystery than this of the all and the all in all? The student will, of course, realize that the illustrations given above are necessarily imperfect and inadequate, for they represent the creation of mental images in finite minds, while the universe is a creation of infinite mind, and the difference between the two poles separates them. And yet, it is merely a matter of degree. The same principle is in operation. The principle of correspondence manifests in each. As above, so below. As below, so above. Yeah, as in the macrocosm, so in the microcosm. And in the degree that man realizes the existence of the indwelling spirit immanent within his being, so will he rise in the spiritual scale of life. This is what spiritual development means: the recognition, realization, and manifestation of spirit within us. Try to remember this last definition, that of spiritual development. It contains the truth of true religion. There are many planes of being, many subplanes of life, many degrees of existence in the universe, and all depend upon the advancement of beings in the scale, of which scale the lowest point is the grossest matter, the highest being separated only by the thinnest division from the spirit of the all. And upward and onward along this scale of life, everything is moving. All are on the path, whose end is the all. All progress is a returning home. All is upward and onward. In spite of all seemingly contradictory appearances, such is the message of the illumined. The Hermetic teachings concerning the process of the mental creation of the universe are that at the beginning of the creative cycle, the all in its aspects of being projects its will towards its aspect of becoming, and the process of creation begins. It is taught that the process consists of the lowering of vibration until a very low degree of vibratory energy is reached, at which point the grossest possible form of matter is manifested. This process is called the stage of involution, in which the all becomes involved or wrapped up in its creation. This process is believed by the Hermeticists to have a correspondence to the mental process of an artist, writer, inventor, I would say filmmaker in my case, who becomes so wrapped up in his mental creation as to almost forget his own existence, and who for the time being almost lives in his creation. Yeah, I can relate to that. Fuck. I'd like to get laid this decade. Can I have something happen to me that didn't happen to me last decade? I'd like to get laid this decade. Jesus. If instead of wrapped, we use the word wrapped, R-A-P-T, perhaps we will give a better idea of what is meant. This involuntary stage of creation is sometimes called the outpouring of divine energy. Just as the evolutionary state is called the indrawing, the extreme pole of the creative process is considered to be the furthest removed from the all. While the beginning of the evolutionary stage is regarded as the beginning of the return swing of the pendulum of rhythm, a coming home idea being held in all of the Hermetic teachings. The teachings are that during the outpouring, the vibrations become lower and lower until finally the urge ceases and the return swing begins. But there is this difference, that while the outpouring The creative forces manifest compactly and as a whole, yet from the beginning of the evolutionary or indrawing stage, there is manifested the law of individualization. That is, the tendency to separate into units of force, so that finally that which left the all is unindividualized energy and returns to its source as countless highly developed units of life, having risen higher and higher in the scales by means of physical, mental, and spiritual evolution. The ancient Hermeticists used the word meditation in describing the process of the mental creation of the universe in the mind of the all. The word contemplation also being frequently employed, but the idea intended seems to be that of the employment of the divine attention. Attention is a word derived from the Latin root meaning to reach out, to stretch out. And so the act of attention is really a mental reaching out extension of mental energy. So that the underlying idea is readily understood when we examine into the real meaning of attention. The Hermetic teachings regarding the process of evolution are that the all, having meditated upon the beginning of the creation, and having thus established the material foundations of the universe, having thought it into existence, then gradually awakens or rouses from its meditation, and in doing so starts into manifestation the process of evolution. This takes place on the material, mental, and spiritual planes successively and in order. So, material, mental, and then spiritual. Thus, the upward movement begins, and all begins to move spiritward. Matter becomes less gross. The units spring into being. The combinations begin to form. Life appears and manifests in higher and higher forms, and mind becomes more and more in evidence. The vibrations constantly become higher. In short, the entire process of evolution in all of its phases begins and proceeds according to the established laws of the indrawing process. All of this occupies eons upon eons of man's time, each eon containing countless millions of years. But yet, the illumined inform us that the entire creation, including involution and evolution of a universe, is but as the twinkle of an eye to the all. At the end of countless cycles of eons of time, the all withdraws its attention, its contemplation, and meditation of the universe. For the great work is finished, and all is withdrawn to the all from which it emerged. But mystery of mysteries, the spirit of each soul is not annihilated, but is infinitely expanded. The created and the creator are merged. Such is the report of the illumined. The above illustration of the meditation and subsequent awakening from meditation of the all is, of course, but an attempt of the teachers to describe the infinite process by a finite example. And yet, as below, so above, the difference is merely in degree. And just as the all arouses itself from the meditation upon the universe, so does man in time cease from manifesting upon the material plane and withdraws himself more and more into the indwelling spirit, which is indeed the divine ego. There is one more matter of which we desire to speak, and that comes very near to an invasion of the metaphysical field of speculation. Although our purpose is merely to show the futility of such speculation, we allude to the question which inevitably comes to the mind of all thinkers who have ventured to seek the truth. Why does the all create universes? The question may be asked in different forms, but the above is the gist of the inquiry. Men have striven hard to answer this question, but still there is no answer worthy of the name. Some have imagined that the all had something to gain by it, but this is absurd. For what could the all gain it did not already possess? Others have sought the answer in the idea that the all wished for something to love, and others that it created for pleasure or amusement, or because it was lonely, or to manifest its power. All puerile explanations and ideas belonging to a childish period of thought. Others have sought to explain the mystery by assuming that the all found itself compelled to create by reason of its own internal nature, its creative instinct. This idea is in advance of the others, but But its weak point lies in the idea of the all being compelled by anything internal or external. If it is internal in nature or creative instinct compelled it to do anything, then the internal nature or creative instinct would be the absolute instead of the all. So accordingly, that part of the proposition falls. And yet the all does create and manifest and seems to find some kind of satisfaction in so doing. And it is difficult to escape the conclusion that in some infinite degree, it must have what would correspond to an inner nature or creative instinct in man, with correspondingly infinite desire and will. It could not act unless it willed to act, and it would not will to act unless it desired to act, and it would not desire to act unless it obtained some satisfaction thereby. And all of these things would belong to an inner nature and might be postulated as existing according to the law of correspondence. But still, we prefer to think of the all as acting entirely free from any influence, internal as well as external. That is the problem which lies at the root of difficulty, and the difficulty that lies at the root of the problem. Strictly speaking, there cannot be said to be any reason whatsoever for the all to act, for a reason implies a cause, and the all is above cause and effect, except when it wills to become a cause, at which time the principle is set into motion. So you see, the matter is unthinkable, just as the all is unknowable. Just as we say the all merely is, so we are compelled to say that all acts because it acts. At the last, the all is all reason in itself, all law in itself, all action in itself. And it may be said truthfully that the all is its own reason, its own law, its own act, or still further, that the all, its reason, its act, its law are one, all being names for the same thing. In the opinion of those who are giving you these present lessons, the answer is locked up in inner self of the all, along with its secrets of being. The law of correspondence, in our opinion, reaches only to that aspect of the all, which may be spoken of as the aspect of becoming. Back of that aspect is the aspect of being, in which all laws are lost in law. All principles merge into principle, and the all principle and being are identical, one and the same. Therefore, metaphysical speculation on this point is futile. We go into the matter here merely to show that we recognize the question and also the absurdity of the ordinary answers of metaphysics and theology. In conclusion, it may be of interest to our students to learn that while some of the ancient and modern Hermetic teachings, or teachers rather, have rather inclined in the direction of applying the principle of correspondence to the question, with the result of the inner nature conclusion, still the legends have it that Hermes the Great, when asked this question by his advanced students, answered them by pressing his lips tightly together and saying not a word, indicating that there was no answer. But then he may have intended to apply the axiom of his philosophy that the lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding, believing that even his advanced students did not possess the understanding which entitled them to the teaching. At any rate, if Hermes possessed the secret, he failed to impart it. And so far as the world is concerned, the lips of Hermes are closed regarding it. And where the great Hermes hesitated to speak, what mortal may dare to teach? But remember that whatever be the answer to this problem, if indeed there be an answer, the truth remains that while all is in the all, it is equally true that the all is in all. The teaching on this point is emphatic, and we may add the concluding words of the quotation. To him who truly understands this truth, hath can come great knowledge. The Planes of Correspondence, Chapter 8, the Kybalion. The great second Hermetic principle embodies the truth that there is a harmony, agreement, and correspondence between the several planes of manifestation, life, and being. This truth is a truth because all that is included in the universe emanates from the same source, and the same laws, principles, and characteristics apply to each unit or combination of unit of activity as each manifests its own phenomenon upon its own plane. For the purpose of convenience of thought and study, the Hermetic philosophy considers that the universe may be divided into three great classes of phenomena known as the three great planes, namely, number one, the great physical plane, number two, the great mental plane, and number three, the great spiritual plane. These divisions, more or less, are artificial and arbitrary, for the truth is that all of the three divisions are but ascending degrees of the great scale of life, the lowest point of which is undifferentiated matter, and the highest point of that spirit. And moreover, the different planes shade into each other so that no hard and fast division may be made between the higher phenomenon of the physical and the lower of the mental, or between the higher of the mental and the lower of the physical. In short, the three great planes may be regarded as three great groups of degrees of life manifestation. While the purposes of this little book do not allow us to enter into an extended discussion of or exploration of the subject of these different planes, still we think it well to give a general description of the same at this point. At the beginning, we may as well consider the question so often asked by the neophyte who desires to be informed regarding the meaning of the word plane, which term has been very freely used and very poorly examined in many recent works upon the subject of occultism. The question is generally about as follows: is a plane a place having dimensions, or is it merely a condition or state? We answer no, not a place, not ordinary dimension of space, and yet more than a state or condition. It may be considered as a state or condition, and yet the state or condition is a degree of dimension in a scale subject to measurement. Somewhat paradoxical, isn't it? But let us examine the matter. A dimension, is a measure in a straight line relating to measure. The ordinary dimensions of space are length, breadth, and height, or perhaps length, breadth, height, thickness, and circumference. But there is another dimension of created things or measure known to occultists and to scientists as well. Although the latter have not as yet applied the term dimension to it, and this new dimension, which, by the way, is the much speculated about fourth dimension, is the standard used in determining the degrees or planes. The fourth dimension may be called the dimension of vibration. It is a fact well known to modern science as well as to the Hermeticists, who have embodied the truth in their third Hermetic principle that everything is in motion, everything vibrates, nothing is at rest. From the highest manifestation to the lowest, everything and all things vibrate. Not only do they vibrate at different rates of motion, but as in different directions and in a different manner. The degrees of the rate of vibrations constitute the degrees of measurement on the scale of vibrations. In other words, the degrees of the fourth dimension. And these degrees form what occultists call planes. The higher the degree of rate of vibration, the higher the plane and the higher the manifestation of life occupying that plane. So that while a plane is not a place, nor yet a state or condition, yet it possesses qualities common to both. We shall have more to say regarding the subject of the scale of vibrations in our next lessons, in which we shall consider the Hermetic principle of vibration. You will kindly remember, however, that the three great planes are not actual divisions of the phenomenon of the universe, but merely arbitrary terms used by the Hermeticists in order to aid in the thought and the study of various degrees and forms of universal activity in life. The atom of matter, the unit of force, the mind of man, and the being of the archangel are but all degrees in one scale, and all fundamentally the same. The difference between solely a matter of degree and rate of vibration, all are creations of the all, and have their existence solely within the infinite mind of the all. The Hermeticists subdivide each other of the three great planes. They divide each of the three great planes into 7 minor planes. And each of these latter are also subdivided into 7 subplanes, all divisions being more or less arbitrary, shading into each other, and adopted merely for convenience of scientific study and thought. The great physical plane and its 7 minor planes is that division of the phenomenon of the universe which includes all that relates to physics or material things, forces, and manifestations. It includes all forms of that which we call matter and all forms of that which we call energy or force. But you must remember that the Hermetic philosophy does not recognize matter as a thing in itself or as having a separate existence even in the mind of the all. The teachings are that matter is but a form of energy, that is, energy at a low rate of vibrations of a certain kind. And accordingly, the Hermeticists classify matter under the head of energy and give to it 3 of the 7 minor planes of the great physical plane. These 7 minor physical planes are as follows. Number 1, the plane of matter. Number 2, the plane of matter B. Number 3, the plane of matter C. Number 4, the plane of ethereal substance. And 5, 6, and 7 are all also the plane of energy. That's odd. It's a little redundant, don't you think? Why would you have 7 different planes all broken down into 7 different subsections of which all of but one of the 7 are the same? That's just odd. The plane of matter A comprises forms of matter in its forms of solids, liquids, and gases, as generally recognized by the textbooks on physics. The plane of matter B comprises certain higher and more subtle forms of matter, of the existence of which modern science is now but recognizing. The phenomenon of radiant matter in its phases of radium, etc., belonging to the lower subdivision of this minor plane. The plane of matter C, known as the 3 great planes, namely the great physical plane, number 2, the great mental plane, and number 3, the great spiritual plane. These divisions are more or less artificial and arbitrary, for the truth is that all of the 3 divisions are but ascending degrees of the great scale of life, and the lowest point of which is undifferentiated matter, and the highest point is that of spirit. And moreover, the different planes shade into each other, so that no hard and fast division may be made between the higher phenomenon of the physical and the lower of the mental, or between the higher of the mental and the lower of the physical. In short, the 3 great planes may be regarded as 3 great groups of degrees of life manifestation. While the purposes of this little book do not allow us to enter into an extended discussion or explanation of the subject of these different planes, still we think it well to have a general description of the same at this point. The plane of matter A comprises forms of matter in its form of solids, liquids, gases, as generally recognized by textbooks on physics. The plane of matter B comprises certain higher and more subtle forms of matter, of the existence of which modern science is now but recognizing. The phenomenon of radiant matter and its phases of radium. Why did they repeat this? We just read this. They repeated this again. The plane of matter C comprises forms of the most subtle and tenuous matter, the existence of which is not suspected by ordinary scientists. The plane of ethereal substance comprises that which science speaks of as the ether, a substance of extreme tenuity and elasticity, pervading all universal space and acting as a medium for the transmission of waves of energy such as light, heat, electricity, etc. This ethereal substance forms a connecting link between matter and so-called energy and partakes of the nature of each. The Hermetic teachings, however, instruct that this plane has 7 subdivisions, as have all of the minor planes, and that in fact there are 7 ethers instead of but 1. Next, above the plane of ethereal substance comes the plane of energy A, which comprises the ordinary forms of energy known to science in the 7 subplanes, respectively: heat, light, magnetism, electricity, and attraction, including gravitation, cohesion, chemical affinity, etc., and several other forms of energy indicated by scientific experiments, but not as yet named or classified. The plane of energy B comprises 7 subplanes of higher forms of energy, not as yet discovered by science, but which have been called nature's finer forces, and which are called into operation in manifestations of certain forms of mental phenomenon, and by which such phenomenon become possible. The plane of energy C comprises 7 subplanes of energy so highly organized that it bears many of the characteristics of life, but which is not recognized by the minds of men on the ordinary plane of development for being able for the use of on beings of the spiritual plane alone. Yeah, that was like a story. I didn't cover this, but I saw this story today about some yellow goo or orange goo in some lab they got to move around and understand commands and do what they wanted it to do. It was just like this, orange pond scum goo that they, taught to obey commands and stuff like that. And they're saying it's, going to reclassify what we view as intelligence. I mean, my God. Yeah, I mean, take a look around you, folks. Pond scum of the earth, or, yellow and orange goo, knowing how to walk and talk shouldn't be a surprise to you. There's plenty of those assholes running around everywhere. I don't know why that's such breaking news. Jesus Christ. How many total dumbasses you see walking around talking out in the world every day? Man, go to the supermarket. The great mental plane comprises those forms of living things I skipped one. Hold on. Let me go back there. The plane of energy C comprises 7 subplanes of energy so highly organized that it bears many of the characteristics of life, but which is not recognized by the minds of men on the ordinary plane of development. Being available for the use on beings of the spiritual plane alone, such energy is unthinkable to ordinary man and may be considered almost as the divine power. The beings employing the same are as gods, compared even to the highest types of humans known to us. Well, that's the whole secret. That's one of the things. That's why they keep us in this state of artificial arrested development. Because man, at its highest achievement, we can achieve those things. We can access the energies of the spiritual world, and we can make them work for us and for our advantage. And they are counting and putting everything. They are going all in on the table, folks, to make sure that none of us ever figure out how to do that and harness that. Because if we do, it's game over for them. They're keeping us in spiritual bondage by keeping us ignorant of the spiritual energies that surround us, that we are capable of using and manifesting and using it for good, not evil, like they do. And they are all in at the poker table to make sure that you and I never figured that out. Well, too late, because we are figuring that out. We are using that. The great mental plane comprises those forms of living things known to us in ordinary life, as well as certain other forms not so well known, except to the occultist. The classification of the 7 minor mental planes is more or less satisfactory and arbitrary, unless accompanied by elaborate explanations which are foreign to the purpose of this particular work, but we may as well mention them as follows. Number 1, the plane of mineral mind. Number 2, the plane of elemental mind. The plane of plant mind. The plane of elemental mind, B. The plane of animal mind. The plane of elemental mind, C. And the plane of human mind. The plane of mineral mind comprises the states or conditions or units or entities or groups or combinations of the same which animate the forms known to us as minerals and chemicals, etc. These entities must not be confounded with the molecules, atoms, and corpuscles themselves, the latter being merely the material bodies or forms of these entities, just as a man's body is but his material form and not himself. These entities may be called souls in one sense and are living beings of a low degree of development and a low degree of life and mind, just a little more than units of living energy, which comprise the higher subdivisions of the highest physical plane. The average mind does not generally attribute the possession of mind, soul, or life to the mineral kingdom, but all occultists recognize the existence of the same, and modern science is rapidly moving forward to the point of view of the Hermetic. The molecules, atoms, and corpuscles have their loves and hates, likes and dislikes, attractions and repulsions, affinities and non-affinities, etc. And some of the more daring of modern scientific minds have expressed the opinion that the desire and will, emotions and feelings of the atoms differ only in degree from those of men. We have no time or space to argue this matter here. All occultists know it to be fact, and others are referred to some of the more recent scientific works for outside cooperation. There are the usual 7 subdivisions to this plane. The plane of elemental mind A comprises the state or condition and degree of mental and vital development of a class of entities known to the average man, but unknown to the average man, not known to the average man, but recognized to occultists. So these are entities that your average day Joe Sixpack doesn't know about, but occultist knows they're there. Those are, demonic entities, spiritual entities that you can call up using certain spells and sometimes they're just, it's a series of words and different things you put together. They are invisible to the ordinary senses of a man, but nevertheless exist and play their part of the drama of the universe. Their degree of intelligence is between that of the mineral and chemical entities on the one hand, and of the entities of the plant kingdom on the other. There are 7 subdivisions to this plane. Also, the plane of plant mind, in its 7 subdivisions, comprises the states or conditions of the entities comprising the kingdoms of the plant world. The vital and mental phenomenon of which is fairly well understood by the average intelligent person. Many new and interesting scientific works regarding mind and life in plants have been published during the last decade. Plants have life, mind, and souls, as well as the animals, man, and superman. The plane of elemental mind B and its seven subdivisions comprises the states and conditions of a higher form of elemental or unseen entities, playing their part in the general work of the universe. The mind and life of which form a part of the scale between the plane of plant mind and the plane of animal mind, the entities partaking of the nature of both. The plane of animal mind in its 7 subdivisions comprises the states and conditions of the entities being or souls animating the animal forms of life familiar to us all. It is not necessary to go into details regarding this kingdom or plane of life, for the animal world is as familiar to us as our own. The plane of elemental mind in its 7 subdivisions comprises those entities or beings invisible as are all such elemental forms, which partake of the nature of both animal and human life in a degree and in certain combinations. The highest forms are semi-human in intelligence. The plane of human mind, in its 7 subdivisions, comprises those manifestations of life and mentality which are common to man in his various grades, degrees, and divisions. In this connection, we wish to point out the fact that the average man of today occupies but the 4th subdivision of the plane of human mind, and only the most intelligent have crossed the borders of the 5th subdivision. It has taken the race millions of years to reach this stage, and it will take many more years for the race to move on to the 6th and 7th subdivisions and beyond. But remember that there have been races before us, which have passed through these degrees and then on to higher planes. Our own race is the 5th, which with stragglers from the 4th, which has set foot upon the path. And then there are a few advanced souls of our own race who have outstripped the masses and who have passed on to the 6th and 7th subdivision, and some few being still further on. The man of the 6th subdivision will be the Superman. He of the 7th will be the Overman. In our consideration of the 7 minor mental planes, we have merely referred to the 3 elementary planes in a general way. We do not wish to go into this subject in detail in this work, for it does not belong to this part of the general philosophy and teachings. But we may say this much. In order to give you a little clearer idea of the relations of these planes to the more familiar ones, the elementary planes bear the same relation to the planes of mineral, plant, animal, and human mentality in life. That the black keys on the piano do to the white keys The white keys are sufficient to produce music, but there are certain scales, melodies, and harmonies in which the black keys play their part and in which their presence is necessary. They're also necessary as connecting links of soul condition, entity states, etc., between the several other planes, certain forms of development being attained therein. This last fact giving to the reader who can read between the lines a new light upon the process of evolution and a new key to the secret door of the leaps of life between kingdom and kingdom. So what he's saying here is that there are also necessary as connecting links of soul condition, entity states, etc. Between the several other planes, certain forms of development began therein. So they're saying that, you evolve and reach a certain point in this, and then you evolve up to some other, you take on some other form in a higher plane of existence once you leave this one. The great kingdoms of elementals are fully recognized by all occultists, and the esoteric writings are full of mention of them. The readers of Bulwer's Zanoni and similar tales will recognize the entities inhabiting these planes of life. Passing on from the great mental plane to the great spiritual plane, what shall we say now? How can we explain these higher states of being, life, and mind to minds as yet unable to grasp and understand the higher subdivisions of the plane of the human mind? The task is impossible. We can speak only in the most general terms. How light may be described to a man born blind, how sugar to a man who has never tasted anything sweet, how harmony to one born deaf. All that we can say is that the 7 minor planes of the great spiritual plane comprise beings possessing life, mind, and form, as far above that of man of today as the latter is above the earthworm, mineral, or even certain forms of energy or matter. The life of these beings so far transcends ours that we cannot even think of the details of the same. Their minds are so far transcended to ours that to them we scarcely seem to think. And our mental processes seem almost akin to material processes. The matter of which their forms are composed is of the highest planes of matter. Nay, some are even said to be clothed in pure energy. Light beings, fourth dimensional light beings. On the 7 minor planes of the great spiritual plane exist beings of whom we may speak as angels, archangels, demigods. On the lower minor planes dwell those great souls whom we call masters and adepts. Above them come the great hierarchies of the angelic hosts, unthinkable to man, and above those come those who may without irreverence be called the gods. So high in the scale of being they are, their being, intelligence, and power being akin to those attributed by races of men to their conceptions of deity. These beings are beyond even the highest flights of the human imagination, the word divine being the only one applicable to them. Many of these beings, as well as the angelic host, take the greatest interest in the affairs of the universe and play important parts in its affairs. These unseen divinities and angelic helpers extend their influence freely and powerfully in the process of evolution and the cosmic progress. Their occasional intervention and assistance in human affairs have led to the many legends, beliefs, religions, and traditions of the race past and present. They have superimposed their knowledge and power upon the world again and again, all under the law of the all, of course. But yet even the highest of these advanced beings exist merely as creations of and in the mind of the all, and are subject to the cosmic processes and universal laws. They are still mortal. We may call them gods if we like, but still they are but the elder brethren of the race. The advanced souls who have outstripped their brethren and who've foregone to the ecstasy of absorption by the all in order to help the race on its upward journey along the path. But they belong to the universe and are subject to its conditions. They are mortal, and their plane is below that of absolute spirit. Only the most advanced Hermeticists are able to grasp the inner teachings regarding the state of existence and the powers manifested on the spiritual planes. The phenomena is so much higher than that of the mental planes that a confusion of ideas would surely result from an attempt to describe the same. Only those of whose minds have been carefully trained along the lines of the Hermetic philosophy for years, yes, those who have brought with them from other incarnations the knowledge acquired previously, can comprehend just what is meant by the teachings regarding these spiritual planes. And much of these inner teachings is held by the Hermeticists as being too sacred, important, and even dangerous for general public dissemination. The intelligent student may recognize what we mean by this when we state that the meaning of spirit, as used by the Hermeticists, is akin to living power or animated force, inner essence, the essence of life, etc. Which meaning must not be confounded with that usually and commonly employed in connection with the term, i.e., religious, ecclesiastical, spiritual, ethereal, holy, etc. To the occultist, the word spirit is used in the sense of the animating principle, carrying with it the idea of power, living energy, mystic force, etc. And the occultists know that which is known to them as spiritual power may be employed for evil as well as good ends, in accordance with the principle of polarity. A fact which has been recognized by the majority of religions in their conceptions of Satan, Beelzebub, the devil, Lucifer, fallen angels, etc. And so the knowledge regarding these planes has been kept in the Holy of Holies in all esoteric fraternities and occult orders, in the secret chamber of the temple. But this may be said here, that those who have attained high spiritual powers and have misused them have a terrible fate in store for them. And the swing of the pendulum of rhythm will inevitably swing them back to the furthest extreme of material existence, from which point they must retrace their steps spiritward along the weary rounds of the path, but always with the added torture of having always with them a lingering memory of the heights from which they fell, owing to their evil actions. The legends of the fallen angels have a basis in actual facts, as all advanced occultists know. The striving for selfish power on the spiritual planes inevitably results in the selfish soul losing its spiritual balance and falling back as far as it had previously risen. But to even such a soul, the opportunity of a return is given, and such souls make the return journey, paying the terrible penalty according to the invariable law. In conclusion, we would again remind you that according to the principle of correspondence, which embodies the truth, as above, as below, so above, all of the 7 Hermetic principles are in full operation on all of the many planes, physical, mental, and spiritual. The principle of mental substance, of course, applies to all the planes, for all are held in the mind of the all. The principle of correspondence manifests in all, for there is a correspondence, harmony, and agreement between the several planes. The principle of vibration manifests on all planes. In fact, the very differences that go on to make the planes arise from vibration, as we have explained. The principle of polarity manifests on each plane, the extremes of the poles being apparently opposite and contradictory. The principle of rhythm manifests on each plane, the movement of the phenomenon having its ebb and flow, rise and flow, incoming and outgoing. The principle of cause and effect manifests on each plane, every effect having its cause and every cause having its effect. The principle of gender manifests on each plane, the creative energy being always manifest and operating along the lines of its masculine and feminine aspects. As above, so below. As below, so above. This centuries-old Hermetic axiom embodies one of the great principles of universal phenomenon. As we proceed with our consideration of the remaining principles, we will see even more clearly the truth of the universal nature of the third great principle of correspondence. All right, let's get into the Kybalion tonight. Vibration, Chapter 9. The great third Hermetic principle The principle of vibration embodies the truth that motion is manifest. In everything in the universe, nothing is at rest. Everything moves, vibrates, and circles. This Hermetic principle was recognized by some of the early Greek philosophers who embodied it in their systems. But then for centuries it was lost sight of by the thinkers outside of the Hermetic ranks. But in the 19th century, physical science rediscovered the truth, and the 20th century scientific discoveries have added additional proof of the correctness and truth of this centuries-old Hermetic doctrine. The Hermetic teachings are that not only is everything in constant movement and vibration, but that the differences between the various manifestations of the universal power are due entirely to the varying rate and mode of vibrations. Not only this, but that even the all in itself manifests a constant vibration of such an infinite degree of intensity and rapid motion that it may be practically considered as at rest. The teachers directing the attention of the students to the fact that even on the physical plane, a rapidly moving object, such as a revolving wheel, seems to be at rest. The teachings are to the effect that spirit is at one end of the pole of vibration, the other pole being certain extremely gross forms of matter. Between these two poles are millions upon millions of different rates and modes of vibration. Modern science has proven that all that we call matter and energy are but modes of vibratory motion. And some of the more advanced scientists are rapidly moving towards the positions of the occultists, who hold that the phenomenon of mind are likewise modes of vibration or motion. Let us see what science has to say regarding the question of vibration in matter and energy. In the first place, science teaches that all matter manifests in some degree. The vibrations arising from temperature or heat, be an object cold or hot, both being but degrees of the same things. It manifests certain heat vibrations, and in that sense is. Why would you put a period in something where it was in the middle of a sentence? That's retarded. It's supposed to say it manifests certain heat vibrations in the sense that it is in motion and vibration. They put a period between is and in. That's retarded. Then all particles of matter are in circular motion, circular movement from corpuscle to suns. The planets revolve around suns, and many of them turn on their axis. And it's supposed to be axis, not axis, not axes, as in an axe to chop a zombie's head off. Jesus. Who the fuck wrote this thing? The suns move around greater central points, and these are believed to move around still greater, and so on ad infinitum. The molecules of which the particular kinds of matter are composed are in a state of constant vibration and movement around each other and against each other. The molecules are composed of atoms, which likewise are in a state of constant movement and vibration. The atoms are composed of corpuscles, sometimes called electrons, ions, etc., which are also in a state of rapid motion, revolving around each other, and which manifest a very rapid state and mode of vibration. And so we see that all forms of matter manifest in vibration in accordance with the Hermetic principle of vibration. And so it is with the various forms of energy. Science teaches that light, heat, magnetism, and electricity are but forms of vibratory motion connected in some way with and probably emanating from the ether. Science does not as yet attempt to explain the nature of the phenomenon known as cohesion, which is the principle of molecular attraction, nor chemical affinity, which is the principle of atomic attraction, nor gravitation, the greatest mystery of the three. That's right. They don't know what causes gravity. It's one of those facts that a lot of people find that a lot of people just don't know. I've said that to a lot of people before. They're like, really? I didn't know that. It is a bit odd when you think about it, you know. All our technological achievements and everything else, we still, as far as they tell us, we still don't know exactly what causes gravity, which is the principle of attraction by which every particle or mass of matter is bound to every other particle or mass. These three forms of energy are not as yet understood by science, yet the writers incline to the opinion that these two are manifestations of some form of vibratory energy, a fact which the Hermeticists have held and taught for ages past. The universal ether, which is postulated by science without its nature being understood clearly, is held by the Hermeticists to be but a higher manifestation of that which is erroneously called matter. That is to say, matter at a higher degree of vibration, and is called by them the ethereal substance. The Hermeticists teach that this ethereal substance is of extreme tenuity and elasticity, and pervades universal space, serving as a medium of transmission of waves of vibratory energy such as heat, light, electricity, magnetism, etc. The teachings are that the ethereal substance is a connecting link between the forms of vibratory energy known as matter. They're known as matter on one hand and energy or force on the other, and also that it manifests a degree of vibration in rate and mode entirely on its own. Scientists have offered the illustration of a rapidly moving wheel, top, or cylinder to show the effects of increasing rates of vibration. The illustration supposes a wheel, top, or revolving cylinder running at a low rate of speed. We will call this revolving thing the object in following out the illustration. Let us suppose the object moving slowly may be seen readily, but no sound of its movement reaches the ear. The speed is gradually increased. In a few moments, its movement becomes so rapid that a deep growl or low note may be heard. And it's just like a synthesizer. You have an oscillator and a synthesizer. When you have a small amount of current going through it, it oscillates very slowly and produces a low tone. And the more voltage that you put into the oscillator, the faster that it oscillates and spins, and the higher pitch you get in the thinner the sound wave is. So the higher pitch you have, the faster a vibration that you have, and then once you have you're reaching such a high speed, you get to the point where human ear can't even pick it up anymore. In a few moments, its movement becomes so rapid that a deep growl or low note may be heard. Then, as the rate is increased, the note rises on the musical scale. Do you guys remember that time Lynn Horowitz did his concert for the Living Water with the Lucifer note, and we did the concert for the Living Brown Water? I did that shit on Oracle, dude. That was one of the most epic things I've ever done, and played the brown tone on the air. Got my synthesizer and plugged it into the board and started hitting all the low, Taurus bass notes. People said their dogs were shitting themselves and stuff in their houses. That was greatness. A concert for the Living Brown Water. That was epic. That shit went out over radio too. Then as the rate is increased, the note rises one in the musical scale. Then the motion being still further increased, the next highest note is distinguished. Then one after the other, all the notes of the musical scale appear, higher and higher, rising higher as the motion is increased. Finally, when the motions have reached a certain rate, the final note perceptible to human ears is reached, and the shrill, piercing shriek dies away, and silence follows. No sound is heard from the revolving object, the rate of motion being so high that the human ear cannot register the vibrations, just as I was saying. Then comes the perception of rising degrees of heat. Then, after quite a time, the eye catches a glimpse of the object becoming a dull, dark, reddish color. As the rate increases, the red becomes brighter. Then, as the speed is increased, and the red melts into an orange. Then the orange melts into a yellow, and then follow successively the shades of green, blue, indigo, and finally violet. As the rate of speed increases, then the violet shades away and all colors disappear, the human eye not being able to register them. But there are invisible rays emanating from the revolving object. The rays that are used in photography and other subtle rays of light then begin to manifest the peculiar rays known as the X-rays, etc. As the constitution of the object changes, electricity and magnetism are emitted when the appropriate rate of vibration is attained. When the object reaches a certain rate of vibration, its molecules disintegrate and resolve themselves into the original elements or atoms. Then the atoms, following the principle of vibration, are separated into the countless corpuscles of which they are composed. And finally, even the corpuscles disappear, and the object may be said to be composed of the ethereal substance. Science does not dare to follow the illustration further. But the Hermeticists teach that if the vibrations be continually increased, the object would mount up the successive states of manifestation and would in turn manifest the various mental stages and then on upward until it would finally re-enter the all, which is absolute spirit. The object, however, would have ceased to be an object long before the stage of ethereal substance was reached. But otherwise, the illustration is correct in so much as it shows the effect of constantly increased rates of modes and vibrations. Yes. That's why I can't stand it. Can't stand it. When people feel the need to just walk around constantly all the time exuding negative vibes, I just cannot stand it. It drives me batshit crazy, and it always has. Cannot stand. I don't know why people feel the need to live like that. I don't know how you can call that living anyway. Just going through every day, just exuding negativity and hate to people for just no good reason at all. But it doesn't even have to be that way. I mean, we can all, increase. Because don't forget that vibe is short for vibration. When somebody says, "Oh man, I don't like that person, I'm getting a bad vibe," well, you're getting a bad vibration. Your spidey sense, your vibrations are picking up on their negative vibrations and reacting in a bad way. That's what it means by, getting good vibes or bad vibes. It must be remembered in the above illustration that at the stages at which the object throws off vibrations of light, heat, etc., it is not actually resolved into those forms of energy, which are much higher in the scale, but simply that it reaches a degree of vibration in which those forms of energy are liberated, in a degree, from the confining influences of its molecules, atoms, and corpuscles, as the case may be. These forms of energy, although much higher in the scale than matter, are imprisoned and confined in the material combinations by reason of the energies manifesting through and using material forms, but thus becoming entangled and confined in their creations of material forms, which, to an extent, is true of all creations, the creating force becoming involved in its creation. But the Hermetic teachings go much further than do those of modern science. They teach that all manifestation of thought, emotion, reason, will, or desire, or any mental state or condition are accompanied by vibrations, a portion of which are thrown off and which tend to affect the minds of other persons by induction. This is the principle which produces the phenomenon of telepathy, mental influence, and other forms of the action and power of mind over mind, with which the general public is rapidly becoming acquainted, owing to these wide dissemination of occult knowledge by the various schools, cults, and teachers along these lines at this time. Every thought, emotion, or mental state has its corresponding rate and mode of vibration, and by an effort of the will of the person or of other persons, these mental states may be reproduced just as a musical tone may be reproduced by causing an instrument to vibrate at a certain rate, just as color may be reproduced in the same way. By a knowledge of the principle of vibration as applied to mental phenomenon, one may polarize his mind at any degree he wishes, thus gaining a perfect control over his mental states, moods, etc. In the same way, he may affect the minds of others, producing the desired mental states in them. In short, he may be able to produce on the mental plane that which science produces on the physical plane, namely vibrations at will. This power, of course, may be acquired only by the proper instruction, exercises, practice, etc. The science being that of mental transmutation and is one of the branches of the Hermetic art. A little reflection on what we have said will show the student that the principle of vibration underlies the wonderful phenomenon of the power manifested by the masters and the adepts, who are able to apparently set aside the laws of nature and who in reality are simply using one law against another, one principle against others, and who accomplish their results by changing the vibrations of material objects or forms of energy, and thus perform what are commonly called miracles. As one of the old Hermetic writers has truly said, he who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power. And that's the end of chapter 9. Chapter 10 is our next one. Let me find my spot there. Chapter 10, Polarity. The great fourth Hermetic principle, the principle of polarity, embodies the truth that all manifested things have two sides, two aspects, two poles, a pair of opposites, with manifold degrees between the two extremes. The old paradoxes, which have ever perplexed the mind of men, are explained by an understanding of this principle. Man has always recognized something akin to this principle and has endeavored to express it by such sayings, maxims, and aphorisms as the following. Everything is and isn't at the same time. All truths are but half-truths. Every truth is half false. There are two sides to everything. There is two sides to every story, etc. The Hermetic teachings are to the effect that the difference between things seemingly diametrically opposed to each other is merely a matter of degree. It teaches that the pairs of opposites may be reconciled and that thesis and antithesis are identical in nature, but different in degree. And that the universal reconciliation of opposites is affected by a recognition of this principle of polarity. The teachers claim that illustrations of this principle may be had on every hand, and from an examination into the real nature of anything, they begin by showing that spirit and matter are but the two poles of the same thing. The intermediate planes being merely degrees of vibration, they show that the all and the many are the same, the difference being merely a matter of degree of mental manifestation. Thus, the law and laws are the two opposite poles of one thing. Likewise, principle and principles, infinite mind and finite minds, are two opposite poles of the same thing. Then passing on to the physical plane, they illustrate the principle by showing that heat and cold are identical in nature. Well, we know that's absolutely true. The difference being merely a matter of degrees. The thermometer shows many degrees of temperature, the lowest pole being called cold and the highest heat. Between these two poles are many degrees of heat or cold. And however you call them, either you are equally correct. The higher of the 2 degrees is always warmer, while the lower is always colder. There is no absolute standard. All is a matter of degree. There is no place on the thermometer where heat ceases and cold begins. It's all a matter of higher or lower vibrations. Exactly. And that's how all life is. That's how all energy is. That's how our souls are. That's how we are. And when you die, you don't cease to exist. You just go on to a different scale of existence on the same, in kind of the same, existing in the same space. The terms high and low, which we are compelled to use, are but poles of the same thing. The terms are relative. So with east and west, travel around the world in an eastward direction, you reach a point which is called west, and you're at your starting point. And you return from that westward point. Travel far enough north, and you will find yourself traveling south, or vice versa. Light and darkness are poles of the same thing, with many degrees between them. The musical scale is the same, starting with C. You move upward until you reach another C. And so on. The differences between the two ends of the board being the same. Many degrees between the two extremes. The scale of color is the same, higher and lower vibrations being the only difference between high violet and low red. Large and small are relative. So are noise and quiet. Hard and soft follow the rule. Likewise, sharp and dull, positive and negative, are two poles of the same thing with countless degrees between them. Good and bad are not absolute. We call one end of the scale good and the other bad, or one end good and the other evil, according to the use of the terms. A thing is less good than the thing higher in the scale, but that less good thing in turn is more good than the thing next below it, and so on. The more or less being regulated by the position on the scale. And so it is on the mental plane. Love and hate are generally regarded as being things diametrically opposed to each other, entirely different and unreconcilable. But we apply the principle of polarity. We find that there is no such thing as absolute love or absolute hate as distinguished from each other. The two are merely terms applied to the two poles of the same thing. Beginning at any point of the scale, we find more love or less hate as we ascend the scale, and more hate or less love as we descend, this being true no matter from what point, high or low, we may start. There are degrees of love and hate, and there is a middle point where like and dislike become so faint that it is difficult to distinguish between them. Courage and fear come under the same rule. The pairs of opposites exist everywhere. Where you find one thing, you find its opposite, the two poles. And it is this fact that enables the Hermeticist to transmute one mental state into another along the lines of polarization. Things belonging to different classes cannot be transmuted into each other, but things of the same class may be changed. That is, they may have their polarity changed. Thus, love never becomes east or west or red or violet, but it may and often does turn into hate, and likewise hate may be transformed into love, all by changing its polarity. Courage may be transmuted into fear and the reverse. Hard things may be rendered soft, dull things become sharp, hot things become cold, and so on. The transmutation always being between things of the same kind of different degrees. Take the case of a fearful man. By raising his mental vibrations along the line of fear-courage, he can be filled with the highest degree of courage and fearlessness. And likewise, the slothful man may change himself into an active, energetic individual simply by polarizing along the lines of the desired quality. The student who is familiar with the processes by which the various schools of mental science, etc., produce changes in the mental states of those following their teachings may not readily understand the principle underlying many of these changes. When, however, the principle of polarity is once grasped, and it is seen that the mental changes are occasioned by a change of polarity, a sliding along the same scale, the hatter is readily understood. The latter, not the hatter. There's so many weird little misspellings in here. The change is not in the nature of a transmutation of one thing into another thing entirely different, but is merely a change of degree in the same things, a vastly important difference. For instance, borrowing an analogy from the physical plane, it is impossible to change heat into sharpness, loudness, highness, etc. But heat may be readily transmuted into cold simply by lowering the vibrations. In the same way, hate and love are mutually transmutable, so are fear and courage. But fear cannot be transformed into love, nor can courage be transmuted into hate. The mental states belong to innumerable classes, each class of which has its opposite poles along which transmutation is possible. The student will readily recognize that in the mental states, as well as in the phenomenon of the physical plane, the two poles may be classified as positive and negative respectively. Thus, love is positive to hate, courage positive to fear, activity to non-activity, etc. And it will also be noticed that even to those unfamiliar with the principle of vibration, the positive pole seems to be of a higher degree than the negative, and readily dominates it. The tendency of the nature is in the direction of the dormant activity of the positive pole. In addition to the changing of the poles of one's own mental states by the operation of the art of polarization, the phenomena of mental influence in its manifold phases shows us that the principle may be extended so as to embrace the phenomenon of the influence of one mind over that of another, of which so much has been written and taught as of late. when it is understood that mental induction is possible, that is, that mental states may be produced by induction from others, then we can readily see how a certain rate of vibration or polarization of a certain mental state may be communicated to another person, and his polarity in that class of mental states thus change. It is along this principle that the results of many of the mental treatments are obtained. For instance, a person is blue, melancholy, and full of fear. A mental scientist bringing his own mind up to the desired vibration by his trained will, and thus obtaining the desired polarization in his own case, then produces a similar mental state in the other by induction. The result being that the vibrations are raised and the person polarizes towards the positive end of the scale instead of toward the negative. And his fear and other negative emotions are transmuted to courage and similar positive mental states. Well, this is crazy. This is exactly what I was getting at the beginning of the show, talking about 2012 and all this stuff. Yeah. I mean, this is good stuff for what we've been talking about. I want to read that again just because I was just thinking about that and I want to mention that. But I'm going to read that again. That's exactly what I was talking about earlier, folks. It's all mind over matter. I mean, whether or not we don't want to allow ourselves to manifest, some outcome that these people in charge want us to manifest. I believe that's what they're doing. They're manipulating us and trying to get us to, but through our fear and our bring about the power of our minds to bring reality into the fold, into material existence is so powerful. They don't want us to know it's real, but they want to use it and manipulate reality without us even knowing or being aware that we're doing it. So I want to read that again for you. A mental scientist bringing his own mind up to the desired vibration by his trained will and thus obtaining the desired polarization in his own case then produces a similar mental state in others by an induction. The result being that the vibrations are raised and the person polarizes towards the positive end of the scale instead of toward the negative. And his fear and other negative emotions are transmuted to courage and similar positive mental states. A little study will show you that these mental changes are nearly all along the line of polarization, the change being one of degree rather than of kind. A knowledge of the existence of this great hermetic principle will enable the student to better understand his own mental states and those of other people. He will see that these states are all matters of degree, and seeing thus, he will be able to raise or lower the vibration at will to change his mental poles and thus be master of his mental states, instead of being their servant and their slave. And by his knowledge, he will be able to aid his fellows intelligently and by the appropriate methods change the polarity when the same is desirable. We advise all students to familiarize themselves with this principle of polarity, for a correct understanding of the same will throw light on many difficult subjects.